My Sweet 16 photo shoot went horribly wrong. My client turned into a bus, and I became WD40. I was a broke photographer with exactly $12.47 in my bank account, which is a number so small it feels personal. My landlord didn't knock anymore. He'd just lean against my door and hiss like a damp radiator that learned English. My stomach was a hollowed-out cavern echoing with regret and instant noodles. So when a Sweet 16 job came in, I accepted it instantly. No thinking. No research, just survival instincts firing like a raccoon grabbing shiny trash. The girl's name was Madison. Normal name. Her mom, Linda, was not normal. Linda showed up wearing a love cardigan that felt legally binding. She smiled too wide. She shook my hand too long. Her eyes scanned my camera like she was planning to fight it later. The park was perfect. Unreal lighting. Golden hour doing unpaid overtime, ducks cooperating, wind behaving itself. This was portfolio food. I lifted my camera. Linda immediately lunged into frame like a goalie protecting a net. Every 30 seconds she grabbed my camera, scrolled aggressively, and deleted photos with the confidence of someone who has never once been wrong. She said things like, "This doesn't glow and Facebook hates shadows." I told her, calmly, spiritually exhausted, "Linda, you use an iPhone 8. I use the laws of physics. We are not the same." She did not like that sentence. We moved to a bridge over a pond. I told her to stop interfering or I'd ghost her and keep the deposit. I said it politely. I said it like a man who still believed consequences were real. That's when the universe glitched. Everything paused. Birds froze mid-air. A duck got stuck mid-quack. The sunlight hesitated like it was buffering. Linda stopped moving. Then she smiled. Her cardigan twitched. Her skin made a sound that skin should not make. A wet metallic creak, like a car door being opened underwater. Yellow leaked through her pores. Freckles rearranged themselves into screws. Her jaw clicked. Her eyes powered on. Headlights. Madison clapped because she thought this was part of the shoot. Linda's arms folded inward. Fingers fused. Bones realigned with crunchy enthusiasm. A stop sign briefly burst out of her shoulder and immediately retracted like it realized it was oversharing. Her mouth stretched wide, then sealed as a grill slid into place. Her teeth fell out and hit the bridge like loose change. I dropped my camera. It hit the ground, took one photo by accident, and that photo later won an award I refused to attend. Linda finished transforming into a full-sized school bus. She idled. Diesel fumes rolled out confidently. School District 7 appeared on her side, misspelled. A child's handprint appeared on a window and wiped itself away. Then she exploded. Not fast. Not dramatic. Educational. The bus ruptured like it had been overfilled with consequences. Yellow paint atomized into mist and coated the trees, the pond, my face, and several ducks who would never recover emotionally. Diesel sprayed outward and ignited midair. The bridge flexed. The sun turned green for a second. A car alarm went off in another county. Madison calmly walked into the fireball. She instantly turned into a massive pile of poop. A heroic mound. Seeming confident. Then the poop exploded too. The shock liquefied my bones. Not broke. Liquefied. My skeleton gave up. My muscles slid off. My thoughts got slippery. I hit the ground and spread. I became a giant, shimmering puddle of WD-40. I smelled incredible, industrial, hopeful. I accidentally fixed a squeaky bench just by existing near it. That's when the Black Friday shoppers appeared. They came out of nowhere. Hearts, elbows, hunger. They saw fire, debris, and me and reacted like it was a clearance aisle. They scooped us up with their bare hands and ate us aggressively. Someone yelled, "Is this organic?" and did not wait for an answer. The friction from their feeding caused a spark. The spark lit the tectonic plates like a stove burner. The earth screamed. Mountains folded. Oceans sloshed. The entire country detonated into a greasy mushroom cloud that smelled like diesel, wax crayons, and poor choices. From orbit, it looked like a tipped fry basket. Eventually, somehow, everything reset. The land reformed, ducks respawned. I reassembled into a man whose knees still felt slippery. The bridge stood there pretending nothing happened, and I knew, immediately, spiritually, deeply, this was not over. I fled to my girlfriend Sarah's house in the suburbs. White picket fences, HOA energy, safety theater. First night there, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and listened to every passing car like it might honk. At 2:13 a.m., I heard a whistle. At 2:14 a.m., I told myself it was a bird. At 2:15 a.m., I looked out the window and saw Aunt Brenda standing under a streetlight in a neon yellow tracksuit, holding spray-painted yellow binoculars, not moving. Every time I passed a window, she blew a silver coach's whistle and held up a sign that read "Crisp edges only." Sleep stopped existing. My phone buzzed with no notifications. My camera turned on by itself at night and took photos of nothing. I'd open the fridge and find yellow American cheese already unwrapped. Once I found a printed screenshot of my face with "underexposed" written on it. By morning, Cousin Mike's truck was circling the block, not parking, just circling, revving, throwing one yellow crayon per lap. By sunset, 850 crayons formed a wax perimeter. Rick redirected traffic in a high-vis vest and people listened immediately, which scared me the most. Sarah stopped sleeping too. She flinched at whistles. She cried when a school bus passed the house. When she found Aunt Brenda bleaching the flower beds to fix the white balance, she snapped. I left. By the time I drove toward my mother's house, I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time in weeks. I smelled faintly like WD-40 again. My reflection looked slightly glossy, and somewhere out there, I knew Linda was recalibrating. The first thing to go was sleep. Not dramatically. Not all at once. It just started ghosting me. I'd lie down, close my eyes, and my brain would immediately play a slideshow of every bad photo I'd ever taken, but all the faces were Linda's. I'd drift off for maybe 12 minutes, then wake up convinced someone had whispered "adjust the exposure" directly into my ear. My phone would be face down on the nightstand, screen dark but vibrating like it was nervous. Nothing was ever on it. The second thing to go was silence. The suburbs are supposed to be quiet. That's the scam. At night, every sound got louder. The hum of the fridge sounded like an engine idling. The wind through the trees sounded like a bus braking too slowly. Somewhere, always, there was a whistle. Not close enough to locate, just close enough to know it was real. At 3:47 a.m. on the fourth night, I heard footsteps on the roof. Not scrambling, not sneaking, just pacing, like someone doing inventory. I didn't look. You never look. By the end of the first week, Aunt Brenda's schedule became clear. She rotated positions. Sidewalk, across the street, directly under the one streetlight that flickered yellow instead of white. She never trespassed. She never spoke. She just observed, adjusted her binoculars, and occasionally scribbled notes on a clipboard that I swear wasn't there a second ago. Sometimes she'd nod, like I'd done something wrong. Mike's truck never stopped circling. It became part of the neighborhood. Dogs stopped barking at it. Kids started using it as a landmark. Turn left after the loud truck became a real instruction. The crayons kept coming. Sarah tried mowing them once. The lawnmower screamed and died immediately. Rick showed up during the day. Always during the day. High-vis vest. Whistle. Authority. He'd wave cars away and explain, very calmly, that our house was under review. Nobody asked by who. They just accepted it. That was the worst part. The acceptance. Inside the house, things shifted. The lights felt wrong. Too warm. Too yellow. I swapped bulbs. They'd be yellow again by morning. The TV would turn on by itself and display nothing but a frozen frame of Linda mid-lunge, pixelated and aggressive. The volume was always set to 1, but it felt louder than it should. My camera stopped working normally. Every photo I took of the kitchen, the hallway, my own hands came out slightly overexposed. Once, I took a picture of Sarah asleep. When I checked it, Linda was standing at the foot of the bed, blurred, smiling, holding a reflector. Sarah started sleeping with the lights on. Then she stopped sleeping at all. She jumped when the fridge clicked. She cried when a school bus drove by 2 streets over. She kept asking me if I'd told Linda our address, like that mattered. The grocery store stopped feeling safe. The first time I went alone, everything was normal until I reached the deli counter. Then Linda popped up behind it wearing a hairnet like she'd always worked there. No one else reacted. She threw yellow American cheese slices at me with alarming accuracy. "Where are the raws, Dave?" she screamed. I left without my wallet. After that, I started noticing patterns. Yellow cars parked too long near the house. Strangers holding phones at chest level, definitely recording. Packages arriving that I didn't order, all empty except for a single crayon or a printed screenshot of my own metadata. The hearings hadn't even started yet, and I already felt judged. I stopped sleeping entirely by day 10. I existed in a fog. My joints felt loose again, slippery. Sometimes I'd wake up on the couch with a faint chemical smell on my hands, like WD-40 was considering a comeback. One night, at exactly 4:00 a.m. the doorbell rang. I didn't answer. It rang again. Through the peephole, I saw nothing. When I opened the door, there was no one there, just a sign taped to the porch railing, crisp edges only. That was when Sarah told me I had to leave. Not angrily, not dramatically, just tired, scared, like someone who'd realized the haunting wasn't going to respect shared custody. I packed what I could. I didn't bring the camera. I didn't trust it anymore. As I drove away toward my mother's house, I checked the rearview mirror. For just a second, I saw headlights. Not a car, not a bus, just headlights. I made it to my mom's house at 6:02 a.m., which is a time that feels illegal if you haven't slept in 11 days. The countryside was quiet in a way that felt smug about it. Trees, space, no streetlights, no whistles. I parked the car and just sat there, engine off, listening for something to go wrong. Nothing did. That should have scared me more. My mom hugged me and said I looked thin, which was polite code for you look haunted. I slept on the couch for 20 minutes and woke up convinced someone had adjusted the contrast on my dreams. Still, 20 minutes was a personal record. Then the mail came. My mum doesn't get much mail. Bills, church flyers, coupons for things she doesn't buy. That day, there was a thick envelope, yellow, no return address. My name spelled correctly, which felt intentional. Inside was a court summons, no explanation, no context, just a date, a time, and the words hearing one printed in a font that felt judgmental. By noon, the church choir arrived. They didn't park on the road. They parked around the property, forming a loose, respectful circle like they were trying not to spook the house. Yellow minivans, matching shirts, pleasant smiles. They began chanting ISO settings in harmony, their voices drifting through the fields like cursed Gregorian presets. Old man Jenkins, my mom's neighbor, waved at them like this happened every week. That night, the searchlight turned on. It came from the observation tower Uncle Steve had apparently built in under 6 hours. Stadium grade, industrial. It tracked me through the windows with the patience of a god that had read the manual. Every time I moved, the beam followed. When I stood still, it pulsed slightly, disappointed. "Subject is underexposed," Steve yelled through a megaphone. That's when I realized the legal system had already been compromised. Hearing one took place in a courthouse that felt like it had been printed instead of built. The walls buzzed softly. The floor flexed. The judge's head was a floating gavel, which nobody commented on. Linda sat across from me, human-shaped again, but her skin had that faint metallic sheen, like a refrigerator you shouldn't touch. Her lawyer, Gary, stood up and immediately began sweating motor oil. He argued that when I became WD-40, I had entered into a verbal contract with the asphalt. The judge nodded like this tract. I tried to speak. My mic squeaked like it needed lubrication. Hearing 2 featured Aunt Brenda on the stand for 6 hours. She talked about my aura, about how it lacked vignette, about how my presence flattened the emotional histogram of a room. She presented charts. They were all yellow. Hearing 3 was postponed because Cousin Mike smoked out the jury box with cigars he described as diesel adjacent. Between hearings, the stalking intensified. Court notices arrived daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes while I was still reading the last one. My mum's phone rang constantly. When she'd answered, there was just the sound of an idling engine and distant chanting. I stopped going outside. The searchlight followed me anyway. By hearing 10, the judge looked 20 years older. He ordered me to issue a color-calibrated apology. I refused. Linda smiled like she'd expected that. Hearing 11 declared the searchlight artistic. Hearing 25 involved a dead crow and a printed JPEG of my face. Hearing 38 saw Rick attempt to arrest my mother for harboring a high-viscosity fugitive. Sleep was gone entirely now. I didn't even try. I existed in a permanent twilight where time felt thick. Sometimes my hands smelled like WD-40 again. Sometimes I'd blink and see the world slightly more reflective than before. By hearing 50, the courthouse had been renamed the Linda Memorial Hall of Justice, and everyone acted like that was always its name. That's when I ran again. I fled to the mountains because mountains feel final. Mountains don't have delis. Mountains don't have Facebook groups. Mountains don't usually have extended families with access to heavy equipment. The cabin belonged to my cousin Leo, 10 miles from the nearest paved road. No cell service. No streetlights, just trees, rocks, and the kind of silence that makes you hear your own organs negotiating. The first night, I slept for 42 minutes straight. It felt illegal. I woke up refreshed enough to panic immediately. By morning, I noticed something off about the birds. They weren't chirping. They were waiting, like they were on a schedule they hadn't been given yet. At noon, the helicopter arrived. It didn't circle. It didn't scout. It knew exactly where I was. It hovered once, doors open, and began dropping backpacks. Hundreds of them, bright yellow. They hit the forest floor and popped open on impact, spilling heavenly glow light bulbs into the underbrush like landmines designed by Pinterest. The woods lit up, not evenly, not naturally, just enough to ruin the shadows. Cousin Mike showed up on a dirt bike an hour later. He didn't get off. He rode in perfect circles around the cabin, spraying diesel fuel with a precision I had to respect. By sunset, the air was thick. The smell crawled into my clothes, into my lungs. I coughed and tasted memory. That night, Aunt Brenda climbed the trees. I didn't see her do it. I just heard it. Branches creaking, fabric rustling, then her voice, echoing through the woods, hooting like an owl but yelling, fix the contrast. Every time I turned on a light inside the cabin, the outside lights got brighter. Every time I turned them off, a searchlight somewhere adjusted. Kyle showed up next. He was on a nearby peak with a tripod and a telephoto lens, documenting my existence like a nature documentary about a creature that had disappointed him personally. Every time I brushed my teeth, the camera clicked. Every time I blinked, the drone hummed closer. I tried to cover the windows. The light found me anyway. The hearings continued remotely now. Video calls. Glitchy. The judge was mostly sawdust at this point. In hearing 75, Linda demanded I smooth the mountains in post. In hearing 120, Mike sued me for lung damage caused by his own cigars. In hearing 180, Aunt Brenda claimed she was my biological mother because we both shared a love for industrial lubricants. No one laughed. Sleep became fragments, micronaps, seconds stolen between noises. I'd wake up convinced I'd honked in my sleep. Sometimes my skin felt too reflective. Sometimes the cabin door squeaked and immediately stopped after I passed near it. I found a clipboard nailed to a tree one morning. On it was a checklist. Subject still grainy. Subject avoiding direct light. Subject refuses apology. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, escalate. That's when I knew the family had meetings. I woke up to the sound of a calm British voice narrating my suffering. "Here, we observe the Linda in her natural habitat," the voice said, perfectly level. "Notice how she stalks without blinking." I opened the cabin door and froze. National Geographic was there, not metaphorically, not spiritually, physically. 3 camera operators in khaki vests were crouched behind rocks, whispering like they were filming a snow leopard instead of a middle-aged woman in a cardigan screaming about exposure values. Linda stood in a clearing, completely still, no blinking, no breathing, just vibrating slightly like a refrigerator that knows secrets. A boom mic hovered above her head. "One key behavior," the narrator continued, "is the warning lunge. Watch carefully." Linda suddenly sprinted 6 feet forward, slapped a laminated checklist onto a tree, and retreated without breaking eye contact. The cameramen gasped. "Magnificent," one whispered. A low third graphic appeared on a monitor. "Linda Bus Mom variant, threat display." She sniffed the air, slowly turned her head toward my cabin, smiled like she'd found a coupon. I backed inside and locked the door. The lock clicked once, then again, then politely unlocked itself. That's when I noticed the other crew. Discovery Channel. They had set up an entire production line just past the tree line. Conveyor belts, clipboards, diagrams. A man in safety goggles gesturing dramatically at nothing. A title card played on a portable monitor. How it's made. Extreme complaint machines. A producer explained it to me like this was normal. "First, you start with a base dissatisfaction," he said, pointing to a diagram labeled mild annoyance. "Then you apply pressure, rejection, boundaries, the word no." On cue, Linda's cousin Rick slammed a stamp down on a form labeled denied. The conveyor belt moved. Next, the producer continued, "You introduce amplification." Aunt Brenda stepped in, screaming about white balance while pouring bleach onto a color wheel. The belt moved faster. And finally, he said, grinning, "Mass replication." Out of a yellow tent walked 12 more Lindas. Not clones. Variants. One had a whistle, one had a clipboard, one was just aggressively nodding. The National Geographic narrator whispered, reverently, "Fascinating." I hadn't slept in 3 days. My hands shook like they were buffering. Every sound felt like an accusation. Every shadow felt like it wanted a refund. I tried to leave the cabin. A PA gently stopped me and asked if I could walk back into frame, but slower, and maybe look more hunted. The hearings were now being live streamed as bonus content. The judge was gone. Just an empty chair with a nameplate that read pending ruling. Linda argued with herself for 4 to 5 minutes and still won. Kyle flew the drone closer. The drone now had its own cameraman. At sunset, both crews packed up. Before leaving, the National Geographic host shook my hand. "Truly a rare phenomenon," he said. "You never expect the prey to still be alive this long." The Discovery producer handed me a release form. "Season 2, he said. "We go international." That night, alone again, I finally slept. I dreamed of silence. I woke up to clapping. Slow, polite, right outside the door. I woke up to a warning label taped to my forehead. It read, "This experience may contain themes of pursuit, yelling, and yellow." I peeled it off and immediately heard a voice from nowhere say, "Viewer discretion advised." The sky flickered. Not lightning, not clouds. A literal buffering icon appeared next to the sun for half a second, then vanished. That's when I knew the universe had lawyers now. Linda had merch. I stepped outside the cabin and there was a pop-up stand where the trees used to be. T-shirts, mugs, tote bags, all with slogans like, "Crisp edges only, where are the raws?" I survived the liquid phase. Aunt Brenda was running the register. She didn't make change. She just stared until people gave her more money. National Geographic returned, but this time with a disclaimer card before every shot. No photographers were harmed legally. Discovery Channel upgraded the production line. Hard hats. Union reps. A whiteboard labeled Karen Pipeline Q3 targets. They interviewed Linda like she was an engineer. It's all about pressure, Linda said calmly, adjusting her cardigan. You apply it everywhere. Sleep, food, hope. Cut to me blinking in Morse code for help. Kyle sold drone footage as NFTs. Each one was just me existing slightly worse than before. They sold out. The hearings resumed automatically. I didn't attend. No one noticed. The courtroom now existed as a podcast. Linda talked for 3 hours an episode. The verdict was always guilty. Ads played for bus insurance and essential oils. Reality started putting footnotes on things. When I drank water, a caption appeared. Hydration does not guarantee safety. When I tried to run, the ground politely informed me it was not rated for chase scenes. Sleep was impossible again. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard a faint whistle. Not loud, just enough to remind me that silence was conditional. One night, I saw myself on TV, not a recording, live. A chyron scrolled beneath me, subject showing signs of non-compliance. Linda waved from the corner of the screen. She wasn't in the room. She didn't need to be. The universe added another disclaimer. This time in the sky. Escape is a narrative device. That's when I understood. This wasn't about photography. This wasn't about the bus. This wasn't even about Linda. This was about content. And I was still watchable. I packed my bag anyway, because even if the universe wants engagement, it still hates quitters. By this point, sleep had become a rumor. Not something I did, just something people online claimed was real. Every time I closed my eyes, my brain would render Linda at 4K resolution, standing at the foot of my bed, whispering words like sharpness and exposure like they were curses. I stopped dreaming entirely. Dreams require rest. I was running on pure cortisol and gas station coffee. The nights were the worst, not because anything happened but because everything might. Every sound became suspicious. Floorboard creak, Linda. Wind outside, Linda testing angles. Refrigerator hum, diesel adjacent. I started sleeping in 12-minute bursts like a malfunctioning server, waking up convinced I'd missed something critical, like a new form of harassment had dropped while I was offline. At 2:43 a.m. one night, I heard clapping, not applause, single claps, slow, judgmental. I froze in bed, heart doing Parker. The clapping wasn't inside the house. It was outside, somewhere vague, somewhere intentional. I crawled to the window and peeked through the blinds like a raccoon avoiding taxis. There was nothing there, which was worse, because Linda's whole thing wasn't presence anymore. It was implication, the idea that she could be anywhere, anytime, doing absolutely nothing but somehow making it hostile. I swear she weaponized absence. She didn't need to show up. She just needed me to believe she might. By week 2 of zero real sleep, my body started rebelling. My hands shook constantly like I was buffering. I dropped my phone 17 times in one day. I forgot words mid-sentence. I once stared at a spoon for 5 full minutes trying to remember if it was mine or part of the surveillance. I stopped answering texts. Everyone sounded fake. Too calm, too well lit. I became convinced Linda had trained the entire concept of normalcy against me. Even silence felt aggressive, especially silence. That's when the notes started appearing. No handwriting I recognized. No envelopes. Just yellow sticky notes materializing in places they absolutely should not have been. On my desk, on my door, inside a closed book, one time inside my shoe, which is where I draw the line ethically. Each note said something slightly different but spiritually identical. Soft shadows. Try again. You're almost there. Why so noisy? No signatures. No threats. Just critique, the kind that crawls under your skin and starts redecorating. I tried moving again, didn't tell anyone, didn't pack properly, just grabbed essentials and left at 5 a.m. like I was fleeing a haunted IKEA. New place, New lock, new address not connected to my name. I even used a fake email. I was careful. First night there, I slept for 20 whole minutes. Then I woke up to the sound of someone pacing outside my door. Not knocking, not speaking, just pacing, back and forth. Back and forth, shoes scuffing slightly, like they were being careful, like whoever it was didn't want to disturb me too much. That's what broke me. The politeness, the restraint. I didn't check the door. I didn't breathe. I sat on the bed, staring at the wall, counting my own pulse like it was a countdown timer. After exactly 9 minutes, the pacing stopped. Under the door slid a single object, a lens cap. Not even one of mine. I don't know how long I sat there after that. Time had stopped behaving normally. My brain felt like it was running on a cracked operating system. Eventually the sun came up, which felt fake, like a set piece wheeled in too late. That morning, I realized something important. Linda wasn't trying to ruin my life anymore. She already had. Now she was just maintaining it. Like upkeep, like lawn care. Like making sure the damage stayed fresh. And the worst part, she didn't even need to be there, because by then, I was doing the job myself. After weeks of fleeing, moving, locking, barricading, and micronapping like a malfunctioning robot, I finally realized something. Linda didn't need to appear in person anymore. She didn't need whistles, drones, helicopters, or crayons. She had learned subtlety. At first, subtlety sounded like freedom. It wasn't. The mailbox was full of nothing. The air was quiet. The woods outside didn't whisper. Even the searchlight from my mom's property had stopped. For a day, I thought maybe she had disappeared. Then I started noticing the smaller things. The implied edits. The way my utensils slowly shifted positions when I wasn't looking. The way a single crayon would appear on my desk perfectly placed, forming a triangle pointing toward the window. I opened the window. Nothing was there. The triangle persisted. I tried to sleep. Of course I tried. Sleep was no longer something that happened to me. It was a negotiation I always lost. I'd lie down, close my eyes, and my own thoughts whispered critiques in Linda's cadence. ISO 800, too dark, not crisp. I went outside once. The trees all had branches bent at exactly the wrong angle. My shoes felt slightly sticky, like I had stepped in industrial lubricant, though I had cleaned the cabin meticulously. Everything was just slightly wrong, just enough to remind me she was still present. I stopped trusting reality. Clocks ticked too fast. Coffee brewed itself over. I found a note in the sugar jar. You forgot the white balance. I stared at it. My hands shook. I put it down. Then the ground shook. Small tremors. Nothing major. Just enough. Enough to remind me the earth itself could be manipulated. The trees shivered in a pattern that looked like Morse code. I read it out loud. Fix your contrast. I screamed. After that, I started looking for escape in the small things. Old cabins. Broken sheds. Anywhere that didn't have yellow anywhere. And that's when I saw it. An abandoned shed on the outskirts of nowhere. Rusted lock, peeling paint, dust so thick it looked like a soft yellow blanket. I kicked the door open. Inside, an old 90s computer sat on a desk. The kind with a CRT monitor that curved like a smile. The keyboard was yellowed and sticky, the keys slightly warped. I turned it on. The CRT flickered. Then, in jagged green letters, Karen Simulator, turn off. Press Y for yes and N for no. My hand hovered over the keyboard. My heart hammered like a drum line. The entire experience, the Sweet 16, the bus explosion, the WD40, the sleepless nights, the stalking, the endless hearings flashed before my eyes. I pressed Y. The screen glitched. The CRT made the faintest sigh. Pixels collapsed into nothing. The world around me shimmered like an old VHS tape being ejected. My muscles felt light. My bones realigned. My brain stopped critiquing itself. And then I woke up.